Good morning, everybody. Welcome to a weird edition of Weekend Wrap Up. It's the Weekend Wrap Up on Monday.
On Monday. It's the Monday morning weekend wrap up.
So, due to circumstances that were unexpected and totally out of our control, we weren't able to be here Saturday.
But we hung in there for the people. We're here on Monday.
We're here on Monday, and this news is still it's still relevant. It's still up to date, and everybody needs to hear it. So we're going to dive into it.
We got a lot to cover today. I'm going to do a tease, which we don't normally do before we get into our commercials here. I just want to tease on the second half of the show. I did a lot of research this week, and I learned a lot of things that I didn't know. So nobody else out there in the free world may care, but I got some information that I didn't have. And particularly, I was diving in on the Shelbyville-Bedford partnership. I got information we're going to cover that came from the Secretary of State's office. I've got information that came from the IRS on financials, stuff that came from a public records request we did with the county finance department. So a lot of pieces to the puzzle kind of fell together, at least in my mind, for me to understand financially where they're at, got a good financial idea, and then also operationally. And I'll just tease one part of the operation part that I didn't understand in my mind until I did this week, which is that the Shelbyville-Bedford Chamber of Commerce does not exist anymore. It is not a legal entity anymore, and we're going to dive into that in the second half. So that's just a little tease. But before we get into all that, maybe we should hear from some sponsors. I think we might have a couple.
We've got a couple sponsors to hear from, and we'll be back with the news that matters.
Yep.
Get the results you want with the personalized service you deserve at Dennis Young Insurance Agency.
As a local independent agency, we offer coverage from several different companies, including Erie. So whether it's auto, home, life, personal, or business, we can find the right coverage to meet your unique insurance needs. And with a rate lock advantage, your rates won't go up as long as you do not change drivers, autos, or addresses. Contact us at Dennis Young Insurance Agency, insuring Shelbyville and surrounding areas since 1988.
All righty, welcome back in here to the news that matters, the weekend wrap up on Monday.
Yes, we're still wrapping up last week, though.
All right, Josh, what you got?
Let's start at the top from last week. A week ago today, last Monday, we had the second city council budget hearing. And the big, the big takeaway from that is that we kind of came to a consensus on where we're going to be at on the upcoming city budget. There was no actual vote. This was still a study session, so we couldn't vote on the budget. But they kind of went around the room, got hands raised on different items. And it seems like we've come to, pretty much where we're going to be on the city budget. As far as personnel, we're going to add 3 people, a police dispatcher, which they were sorely in need of. They were short one. They have one shift that was understaffed. A city engineer, which that's a position that theoretically, knock on wood, should pay for itself. We actually have been paying over $100,000 a year in outside engineering costs. Last year, that actual number was $135,000. And years before that, it had been as high. I saw some numbers like 180, 190, depending on how much is going on in the city.
I think it's a good move, Josh.
Yeah. So the idea is, why are we going to continue to pay that for outside consultants when we could just hire one of our own?
And outside consultants, a lot of times you're held up waiting on them too.
There's a lot of waiting on that. And we've got the guy that we're using is great, but he has a full-time job in Murfreesboro. So we're just a part of his workload. So he comes down here as he can, but he's not here 5 days a week. And you've got departments that get held up waiting on him to get down here. So, and then the last position is actually a new one, GIS technician. That's something that is just, we're just behind the curve.
What is GIS?
Technology. That is the mapping, where you do the mapping of everything from, that'll be used by our codes department, by our planning department, by our stormwater department. They'll map everything from manhole covers to fire hydrants for the fire department, just where you can have that all electronically, where they can get access to that when they need it. One place where I know in particular that we're behind on, because I do a lot of work in planning, is if you want to find where a parcel in the city, what it's zoned currently, we have a couple different zoning maps, but there's no guarantee that they're right up to date. If there had been a change made in the last, like a rezoning on a parcel within the last 3 or 4 years, that map is out of date.
Right.
And so by having a person, hopefully we can get our stuff up to date. So additionally included were 4% raises for our employees across the board. Equipment wise, a couple pickup trucks, 3 new police cars, 4 mowers, then a couple other smaller items. The big issue at the first budget hearing, the concern with at least a good part of the council, was that we were digging too deep into our general fund balance. So, which is obviously not a good thing, because you can't do that very often or you run out of money. So that's like digging into your savings account.
It's like our federal government situation.
It's like our federal government.
Deficit.
It was deficit spending.
Yeah.
We were in deficit spending. And I'm not going to lie to you, we're still going to be in deficit spending this upcoming year. But we got it cleaned up enough that I feel comfortable with the direction we're headed in. We're going to stay, if we end up buying the flood pumps in this calendar year, we're still going to end up with a fund balance at the end of the year well above $12 million, it looks like, give or take. And those flood pumps may still not make it into this year. They've been delay. If those are still, if that money's still sitting in the general fund, we'll still be at about $15 million, which is almost where we're sitting at right now. So overall spending for the city for the upcoming year will be $28.6 million. So just in general, another takeaway I got from that meeting is, obviously you and I talk a lot about conservatism on the show and being a conservative. Right. And I did have the opportunity to cut some additional spending at this meeting that I passed up on. I was the swing vote on the employee raises. If I had gone with the 3%, the people that are voting 3, we would have 3 instead of 4. This GIS technician, I really pulled for that. And the reason I did that was I was trying to balance that need for cutting spending with just having us, stagnant, staying,
right.
We could have just cut every piece of equipment, every new position, and just stayed where we're at. But as a city, we're growing. And if you're not growing along with your growth, you're really going backwards. So if you want your service levels to stay the same, you got to do something to keep up with what's going on here. So it's a tough balancing act. We'll see at the end of the year where we're at. And I may come back with egg on my face at the end of the year and the fund balance be too low. Right. And I'm going to be upset with myself for how, some of the decisions I made. But I was trying to look for some kind of balance there where we're still moving in a forward direction. But we also don't want to be like Washington, where we're just spend.
Well, they passed their bill and they think everything's okay, and everybody pushes it to the side till it shows up again.
Yeah.
Maybe our city cannot do that and start the day this is passed and start looking forward to next year of where we can maneuver around our funds better, and maybe our sales tax increase will help some.
Depending on where that court case goes. Yeah, that's still another year and a half out before we know that. So, but I'll be keeping an eye on it throughout the year, because we do get a report every single month just showing us percentage wise where we're at, and just hopefully we will we'll stay in line. And in general, our departments do a great job. If you look at last year's budget and then how much they actually spent this year, I think we came in about $3 million again this year under budget on spending. So
that you don't see that happen very much in government.
Yeah, this is not like you always hear about, if you don't spend the money in your budget, you're going to lose it. So everybody get rushes to spend it in a year. That's not true at this smaller local government level. Yeah. A lot of times they don't spend all the money in the budget, and that's a good thing. They're going out of their way to try not to overspend their budget. So, and I expect that going forward. So, Tuesday evening we had a big, massive 20-minute long city council study session. Massive 20 minutes. That was the shortest city council study session I have ever been a part of, observing or being in the study session. Because basically it was just a big long list of rezoning requests, and all of them pretty much had been previously discussed. So there wasn't a whole lot of discussion to happen. There was only one that had come through from planning unfavorable. They gave a brief 2 or 3 minute explanation of why. It was really simple and straightforward. There was nobody there from the public to speak for or against anything on the agenda, so they just blew right through it.
That's good.
And we had just been there 2 hours the night before.
That's right. That didn't hurt, did it?
That didn't hurt either. So Tuesday evening was actually the same evening as I was sitting at City Council. They started a county budget hearing, which I was able to sneak into about the last 30 minutes of this, but I missed the initial hour or so. And if you tried to watch it online later, like I did, unfortunately, you missed about half of the conversation because the questions came from the audience. And at the beginning, anyways, the first 45 minutes, the audience didn't have microphones.
Yeah, I was watching that, and it was you couldn't hear
frustrating,
anything.
Yeah,
you kind of got the direction of the conversation, but you couldn't hear Mr. Boutwell particularly.
Mr. Boutwell, and that's what I'm going to try to get into a little bit, because I think he had a lot of good things to say that a lot of people didn't get to hear, me included. I didn't get to hear his whole pitch, but I got enough from the other side of the conversation, and I cranked up my earbuds as good as I could, and I think I've got a little bit of the direction he was trying to go. And he, as we know, he served on the school board for a number of years, and then he's gone over to the county commission. He continues, his big focus is on school spending. And I think he had some good points, which is that on the local funding side of our school operations budget right now, in the budget book, which I got on Monday at the same time as the rest of the county commission did here, this very massive budget book that they give us on the county side, local funding for school operations starting from 2021 to this upcoming budget, which is 4 budget years, has only increased $125,000
in 4 year time period.
In 4 year time period. So on the operations side of things, if you just look at the property tax side of things, which is really what the county commission controls, is your property taxes.
Right.
There has actually been a decrease in spending on school operations of $450,000 in the past 4 years. So not only has there not been going up a lot, it's actually gone down on that. It's been balanced out by the increase in sales tax revenue coming in.
And also we're getting more TISA money from the state.
So that's what's happened.
Yeah, we're getting all this increase in spending that we're getting to do. It's all coming from the state, and our county is backing off a little bit.
Has backed off in conjunction with that. So his point, I think, was, again, not being able to hear his whole conversation, but his point he's made often before is, where are our priorities at? If we're, as a local government, concerned about education, why are we letting the state and the federal government be the ones to do the funding? And why do we keep, pulling back? In that same time period, in the general side of the local government, the non-school side, this would be the sheriff's, fire department, EMS, yada, yada, yada. We've actually gone $5.8 million up in property taxes that we're spending on that part of the local government. So I think that was kind of the point.
It's not the same proportion. We're going backwards here, and everybody else is going forward.
Everybody else is going up. Right. When we had that big tax increase 3 years ago, they gave that average 30% raise across the board, but across the board did not mean anybody on the education side. That was non-education employees. That was outside the school system. So
I think there's one number that Mr. Boutwell has brought up before. As far as other districts in our state, I think there's 128 districts, or it's between 120 and 130. Yeah. We're at second from the bottom as far as how much we spend per student from the county, from our county funds.
Yeah. So we're down at the bottom in that. Now, the argument that was made a little bit even at this meeting, and has been the pushback to him, has been that currently there has been a focus by our local county government on the construction side of the equation, on the capital expenditures. We actually have been spending a lot of money on the buildings, but his point, I think, would be you got to balance out what you're spending on the operations with what you're spending on the buildings. You can have a lot of really nice buildings and not spend enough on the actual operation of the buildings. So, so that was kind of that was about the first half of the meeting, what they covered. A couple of points that weren't discussed, because from either side, I was able to hear enough about this, which we talked about last week. The nonprofits, which they decided not to increase any of their spending, the $58,000, that was not even discussed in this meeting at all. And in this lovely thick binder, which has a lot of pages, which you would think would have room for information, they did not present to the county commissioners the requests from the nonprofits. I thought there'd be a section in there that said, even though we didn't fund them, here's what they asked for. That's not even in there.
So is that going to come up at a later date? Or?
It's only that one line which we read from the summary here, it just says we decided not to fund the nonprofit increase, 58,000.
So the vote's not even, it's already decided before the vote's taken place.
It's been decided before the commission even.
Okay, so that's coming from the finance committee is recommending that. Is that the way I take it?
I didn't hear the finance committee discuss it either. So nobody discussed it in open
We discussed it. We talked about it, but we talked about somebody talking about it.
It was done at the administrative level, I guess, because it was, it was not, it's not in the binder. They didn't discuss it. Now they're going to have one more meeting in another week from tomorrow, so they could still discuss it. But at this particular meeting, nobody even brought it up. So
where goes that?
I think they're not going to get funded is basically what's happened. Also not discussed at this meeting was the fact that the additional firefighters and sheriff's deputies did not get funded in the budget. There was no discussion of that either. It was read off. Now, they did read down the summary document we had last week, so it was read off, verbally to the group, but nobody asked any questions about it. They just flew right by it. So I was surprised by both of those. I thought both of those would have a little more discussion going on with them. So that was the front half. Now, let's get to the back half of the meeting, which this was a presentation by the Shelbyville-Bedford Partnership. I want to make a couple caveats in this before we get into this. The money that the county is giving to them or proposing to give to them is $100,000.
Right.
The overall spending in this budget binder right here is $194 million. So in the grand scheme of things, $100,000 is not even a tiny rounding error.
No.
I think I did the math. It's like 5/100ths of 1%.
Right.
I mean, it's nothing.
Minute.
It's minute. But for whatever reason, there is a deep political divide right now on the Shelbyville-Bedford Partnership. I've got people that I would consider to be good friends, people that I respect, that, you would think the Shelbyville-Bedford Partnership is the best thing since sliced bread. They walked on water and they can't do anything wrong. And then I've got people that I'm good friends with and that I respect, and they just feel like they're the worst thing ever. And how quick can we cut off their funding? So they've become a bit of a political hot potato, which is, I think, why they took up 30 minutes of this meeting, even though they are such a small part of this overall budget. So we're going to dive in. Last week we talked about it. Our school superintendent, Dr. Garrett, last week had asked 3 questions about the partnership. She'd asked what the county's return on investment was with them. She'd asked what the difference is between the foundation and the partnership, the nonprofit side of it. And then she'd also asked the question, will the partnership ever be self-sufficient? We'd always heard that they're going to be able to
after 5
operate
years
without county or city money. And is that going to happen? So all of those questions were answered in this presentation. We're going to give you their answer, and then we're going to discuss them because I don't agree with a couple of them. And so if we could dive in, we're going to start with clip 1. This is the answer by the chairman of the partnership's board of directors to what is the county's return on investment to their $100,000.
Well, what's the return on investment? And that's not typically, as a government providing services, you're providing services that the private sector won't do because it's not profit. But we have basically come up with an analysis which I can take you through the details of it. But it's essentially the analysis with many assumptions, and it's a return on investment rate of return analysis, as opposed to an internal rate of return analysis or a discounted cash flow analysis. But based on that rate of return, or return on investment analysis, it comes up to over the period of the life of the partnership, a 328.08% return on investment, or on an annual basis, if you take that divided by the number of years, it's 54.68. So a substantial return, and I can go, if you all want to hear all the details of it, I'm happy to go through it now. I don't know if you want to hear it, but if you may ask me if you want to. I will.
Okay, that was a clip of Mr. Jody Lambert, chairman.
That was the chairman. He was trying to explain what the county's return on investment is. First, let me just give the 2 numbers he read out: 328.08% overall and 54.68% annual. 328% of what? There
The
was
100,000, the 100,000.
no numbers read off. Are we talking about the money that the counties put in? Are we talking about the money that the cities put in? Are we talking about the money that private companies have put in? What's the output? Are we talking about grants that have come out of it? Or I could pick two random percentages out of thin air and throw them out. So he offered to give background there. He didn't actually give the background. If you watch the whole meeting, he didn't. So those were just two percentages that they calculated based on something that we're not sure what they were. Now, later in the meeting, Commissioner Maddox asked him for more detail on that, and they said they would provide it. As of right now, I've not heard that they've provided that to anybody, but that's just a couple other points there. He said they made a lot of assumptions to come up with those percentages. So, statistics can be, turned in whichever way you want to, depending on how you're looking at it. And then also he talked about they don't really have a return on investment because they're a government entity. And I would argue they're not a government entity.
No, they're not.
A private organization.
Right.
So they're working with government entities, but they're definitely not one. So
And the question is, do you give $100,000, the government taxpayer money,
right,
that the government entity give that to a private?
They're the definition of what's called an NGO, non-government
Right,
organization, that uses government dollars to do a particular thing. So I think, honestly, it was a little bit of misunderstanding the question. I think what people were looking for was not a random 328% number, but an actual give us some physical things you can point to that were, good, positive things that have come out of our $100,000, not necessarily just a random percentage amount. So, we're going to move forward. One thing that he did give some actual numbers on, he actually gave these, I think, before that ROI number, was tourism. This is the big focus that they've had at the partnership for the past year and a half. They've been saying tourism. This is how we get sales tax dollars in. This is how, we bring the people into the county. They give us tax dollars. They leave. We don't have to put their kids in school. That's the whole talking point that we've been hearing for the past year and a half. So he gave us some tourism numbers, which we're going to listen to his numbers, and then we're going to give you some of the actual numbers. I'll just tell you real quick, the number he's going to give you is he found a report from the Department of Tourism that looked overall, big picture, it was either state or nationwide, that if you put $1 in advertising towards tourism, you get an $11
tax refund,
local revenue tax return to the local government. And he extrapolated on that general study to come up with an amount that he feels like they've generated for the county. So let's listen to what he has to say. And then I've actually got some actual numbers we're going to run through from the state.
All right.
The Tennessee Department of Tourism Development. And that study found that for every $1 of expenditure on tourism advertising resulted in $11 of tax revenue. Again, $1 of expenditure for tourism advertising resulted in $11 of revenue, tax revenue. And that was the average across the country. Tennessee was 19. As far as community benefit, $1 of expenditure resulted in $521 of community benefit. So, translating those numbers through grants, the partnership received $138,400 of grants for tourism. So you convert those numbers to additional tax revenue, you wind up with $1,522,400 of additional revenue created by those grants that Kelly had worked on.
Okay. So, again, he took a State Department of Tourism, it's an actual study, and it said that the nationwide average was if you put $1 into tourism advertising, you get $11 worth of local tax return on that. That's a good general study, and I'm sure that may be the average. He then took the fact that they generate $138,000 in grants for tourism and extrapolated that to say that they therefore generated $1.5 million worth of local tax revenue. That is a straight up logical fallacy. You can't go from point A to point B there. And oddly enough, or I guess interestingly enough, maybe, we have those actual numbers. We actually reported on these back in the fall when these came out. These came straight from the Tennessee Department of Tourism. Bedford County was 49th in tourism in 2022 and remained 49th in tourism in 2023. The total local tax revenue generated by tourism in 2022, this is the total, this is not the increase, this is the total amount, $1.19 million. So the increase to 2023, which is the first year that the partnership took over the tourism operation for us, they actually, in their defense, I think 6 months of this year was them, and the previous 6 months, the first half of the year, it was under the chamber, the second half, it was under the partnership. But either way, the increase went all the way up to a whopping $1.25 million.
All right, I got a logical question. Okay, in 2022,
yeah,
the partnership
was not in over tourism.
Not over tourism. Okay. Yeah. How in the world did we ever generate 1.191 600,000 without them?
Somehow we did, but once they took over, the actual increase, which he proposed, was $1.5 million increase, which is impossible because we didn't even get to $1.5 million. The increase was $65,700. According again to the State Department of Tourism, Bedford County for that year had a 3.4% increase in tourism dollars, which seems like a good amount, other than the fact that the state average increase in tourism was 6.2%. So we're trailing the state in tourism, which you and I have talked about tourism here locally before. I don't
see people bringing their family to Bedford County and spending a week on vacation. I see some people coming into town for horse shows
for certain events.
Yeah. And it's part of their business. It's part of what they like to do. And that's been here for years, and it's gone down a lot in the last 20 years. So I'm going to say our tourism around here is on the decrease.
Yeah.
Now, how do you get that turned around? I don't know. Build Walt Disney World here? I don't know. But Josh, I mean, we really aren't a tourist destination, even though we might be a weekend traveler destination, but we're not a tourist destination the way I think of a tourist. Maybe I'm wrong.
Right. Now, I dug a little deeper, because we like to do that, into where they actually spent that $130,000 worth of grant money. They did establish a website and a social media presence for their tourism department of the partnership. They've developed a Facebook page, which when I checked it, as of when I did my research last week, had a whopping 775 people following it. They got a nice Instagram account that had 103 people following it. And then the website listed 131 businesses or points of interest in Bedford County. And so I just picked a random category that we know a lot about, because we talk about all the time, coffee shops. I clicked, I said, show me all the coffee shops in Bedford County. I got the Bell Buckle Coffee Shop, I got Seven Brew, and I got Gracie's Cafe. And that was it. And Gracie's Cafe has not been in business for well over a year. That was a little place in next to Brass Lantern over on the east side of town that never took off. So, so I would just propose that maybe the $130,000 in grant money that was generated for tourism didn't necessarily generate $1.5 million in local tax revenue.
And honestly, Josh, I don't know how you ever track that to begin with. It's just a hypothetical number you're throwing out there.
And even these numbers, the $1.25 million from the State Department of Tourism,
they're guessing.
That's a little bit of a guess. Yeah, they don't have any magic.
How do I know when a dollar spent in this town that's coming from somebody just passing through versus somebody that's come here to go see a site somewhere?
Right.
Yeah. That's what a tourist does. Okay.
All right.
But anyway, so that's another discussion.
So that's the tourism part of it. Now let's get into the second question that Dr. Garrett had last week, which got answered at this meeting. This is clip 3. This is, what is the difference between the foundation and the partnership? Okay. So let's play this and we'll discuss.
Bedford Community Foundation, and this may be the question which you were getting to, Dr. Garrett, is the relationship between the foundation and the partnership. So the partnership is a 501c6, and the foundation is a 501c3 entity. They were created on the same date as companion organizations. People in a trader business can make contributions to the partnership and deduct those contributions under one code section of the internal code. But people who are not in a trader business would not have that same ability to do that. So the 501c3, they can get a charitable contribution under a different code section. So it enables a broader pool of people to make contributions that benefit both the partnership and the Unity Foundation. So
that's an interesting bit of information, Josh.
So the foundation, if you heard what he said there, is really just a funnel that funnels in money to the partnership that allows them to accept private donations in a tax-deductible manner.
Right.
So what I found doing, and there was further questions asked there by other commissioners that were there, because there were some questions asked during this session about getting the financials of the partnership, which we had part of that puzzle last week. We talked about the foundation financials, which we got a hold of from the IRS. So this week we got the partnership financials from the county finance office. And before I even got into the numbers, the first thing that jumped out at me right at the top was Shelbyville Bedford Partnership, including chamber operations, beginning February 7th, 2024. So sometimes I'm a little slow in the head. And I had been listening all this time for the past year or two to the discussion of what had gone on with the chamber and the partnership and the foundation.
Right.
And in my apparently incorrect mind, I thought you had the partnership up here, and they were kind of a parent organization,
Right.
and that you still had the chamber over here,
foundation
and then
over
the
here.
foundation
Right.
over here. What actually happened, according to our friends who I contacted at the Secretary of State's office, in February 7th of 2024, we had a merger of the Shelbyville Bedford Partnership. The qualified survivor of this merger was the Shelbyville Bedford Partnership. The qualified non-survivor, which means it's dead,
Gone.
They didn't survive, the Shelbyville and Bedford County Chamber of Commerce Incorporated, which was incorporated in 1948. So from 1948 to 2024, you had an entity that was a corporation, a nonprofit, that was the Chamber of Commerce. As we sit here today in 2025, there is no legal separate entity in the state of Tennessee that is the Shelbyville and Bedford Chamber of Commerce. The partnership is the chamber. When you make a donation to the chamber, or when you pay your membership dues to the chamber,
It goes
into the partnership. It's not the partnership here and they're overseeing the chamber.
Right.
They are
all one entity.
which, and I'm not saying that they were misleading in that. I'm just saying in my tiny little brain, I still thought that the chamber somehow existed. It doesn't.
Well, a lot of people think that.
There's no separate board. When you have a separate 501, you've got a board of directors. Right. There used to be a board of directors for the chamber. That board does not exist anymore. There is one board of directors. The 8 members that are on the partnership board, they are the chamber board as well. There is no separate entity there. And that was also bore out in the actual financials. So this was the financials of just the partnership half of the equation, which we now know there's 2 halves, partnership, foundation, which those are 2 separate entities. On the partnership side of it, they had $341,880 in revenue. And of that, $187,527 was membership dues, which that would be Chamber of Commerce membership.
Right.
So a big part of their funding now on the partnership side is coming from that $350 plus you pay to be a chamber member.
So if you're joining the Chamber of Commerce, where you think that you might be getting some benefits as a business owner in the city and county,
right? Yeah,
you that money's actually funding other.
Well, you are a member of the partnership.
You're a member of the partnership.
It's one and the same. So, combined numbers, real quick, because we were able to get both sets. Actually, this piece here was sent out to all of the county commissioners by their request at this meeting. But this is only half of the puzzle. This is the partnership half of the puzzle. We additionally got, if you go on, the IRS keeps 990 forms. You need to piece together the same time period. There's a financials for the foundation. It says in the report, they share employees, they share operational costs. They are,
Right.
he even said that in
Right,
there. I mean,
right.
it's just
They're
a funnel
together.
getting
Yeah.
money together. So the total between both organizations together for the last fiscal year, 2024, they had $565,000 in revenue and $548,000 in expenses. I'm rounding there up to the nearest thousand. Of those expenses, $272,677 was salaries, another $24,000 in payroll expenses, and then another $124,000 in what they're calling on here. They say fees for non-employee services. To me, that's generally 1099 contract labor kind of stuff. So if you add all that together, of the $548,000 they spent, $420,000 of that went to payroll. So about 77% of their expenses is just keeping
Right.
people employed over
Right.
there.
Right.
And then, as we discussed last week, the only dollars going out that are easily measurable are the teacher grant program. And that was in this same time period. They gave out $14,000 in teacher grants. So about 2.6% of their expenses went to teacher
Right.
grants. The rest went to overhead and
Well, so basically, you look
employees
at you ask the question. All right, $421,000 payroll, 77% of the revenue. What is that payroll generating? What are the
that gets back to
employees?
return on the
Right.
investment
Right.
and all that.
So
discussion.
that's where
So
the investment is from the donations, and their revenue coming in is all in manpower.
it is in manpower, pretty much. Yeah. So, which gets us to the final question, which was one a lot of people have been asking, but I had ever seen them ask it directly, which is, will the partnership ever be self-sufficient and be able to operate without taxpayer money? So, and let's hear their answer and we'll discuss it.
You know, when you say and I was not here when those comments were made, but self-sufficient, we do get the grants, but we spend all the grants, and the grants create dollars that pass to the county and to the city. So those dollars don't flow to us. So, I mean, if we get dollars that are self-sufficient, I would submit that, in effect, the government is hopefully getting more dollars than they're giving to us, and we're just asking them to give back that be a conduit for the dollars that we're generating to replace those dollars. So I would argue that we would be self-sufficient in the sense that we are growing those dollars that you're getting, and you're only giving us a piece of those dollars back. So I would submit that we're self-sufficient in that respect.
Thank you.
Okay.
That's an interesting way to look at that.
So that's a good spin on it, but short answer to that is they will continue to ask for the $100,000
Right.
from the county and possibly from the city as if they come back and ask again.
And he's viewing
going
that
forward
as
forever.
basically a commission for the work they're doing.
A commission for
Right,
the work that
basically.
they're doing.
Okay.
Yeah, he's saying that they've generated enough in grants to the different entities that they should be kicking some back to the partnership for
Right.
that. So now I would say, based on these financials, just real quick, as far as the self-sufficient part, a big portion of this was the former CEO that they used to have there was a big portion of the salaries. He was still here during this fiscal year.
Right.
So if you take that out of this equation right here, if all the rest of the numbers stayed the same, they could operate without that $100,000 in county money.
Oh, yeah,
So,
absolutely.
yeah, they
Without
still
a-
could have
without
covered
a
all
problem.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So all of which is to say, I think it's going to continue to be a hot button issue. Personal feeling, just going to a lot of county meetings, is I think the county continues to fund them this year at $100,000. I don't think there are the votes to shut it down. So far, we've never had a year where they were able to get it to the floor to have a vote nobody was able to make the right motion at the right time to actually have a floor vote to get a count of who's for and who's against. But just knowing all the players involved, I think if it did get to a vote, I think they still could get the 10 votes to fund them. So it'd be interesting, though, to see if they're able to actually get it to a vote this year.
Yeah,
so,
and like you said earlier, it is just a small amount of money compared to the whole budget.
Right.
But for some reason, it's a hot button.
It is.
It's a hot topic.
It is.
And that's a strange situation. I'll just say that
Yeah.
we're so tore up about it, but I get it.
Yeah.
I think it's the fact that you have taxpayer money going to private organizations. And you know what? Maybe somewhere down the road, we'll get wise and just say, look, we're going to use taxpayer money for taxpayer services and let that be that, and do away with all donations,
Right.
but encourage those donations. If you would like to give money and, help with this, instead of just writing a check for us out of our money.
Out of our money.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which the city has done that. The city council a couple years ago, way before I was there, voted they don't give to straight nonprofit donations anymore. There are 3 that they're required to by law, which is the library, and I'm going to forget the other 2 off the top of my head, but there's 3 that they have to. Senior Citizen Center, and there's one other one. I think it was Tennessee Rehab, maybe, because of state maintenance of effort laws. But other than that, they cut out all nonprofit funding just because it gets controversial. I mean, do we fund this group that's doing a great job on, pregnancy counseling? Do we fund this group that's doing a great job on, substance abuse counseling? Who is deserving, who's not deserving? Wouldn't it be a better choice to just have the public make those decisions, make those donations,
because
let the government stay in the government?
Right,
business.
exactly.
So,
and I think maybe one day we'll get there, but
Possibly.
Who knows, Josh?
Who knows? But that was it for the week that just happened. That I know that all was in Monday and Tuesday of last week, but really the rest of the week was kind of calm. We had, stupid stuff about zebras and
whatnot, gosh, I got tired of the zebra, Josh.
Yeah, but hey, the zebra's caught, so everything's good.
Breaking news, though, we had a plane crash in Tullahoma.
We did have a plane crash in Tullahoma. Actually,
everybody was okay.
I believe there was, from everything we heard, there was no fatalities. That actually is an outfit that my wife has wanted to do.
That. You want to go skydiving, do you, Josh?
I do not.
You
my
don't?
wife
Okay.
has been bugging me to let her go down there because they do the tandem skydiving. And I said, this is probably not a good sign for that. But
no, it happens, though.
Yeah, it does. So with that, let's hear from our sponsors one more time. We'll talk about what's happening in the week that's already started here. So.
Get the results you want with the personalized service you deserve at Dennis Young Insurance Agency.
As a local independent agency, we offer coverage from several different companies, including Erie. So whether it's auto, home, life, personal, or business, we can find the right coverage to meet your unique insurance needs. And with a rate lock advantage, your rates won't go up as long as you do not change drivers, autos, or addresses. Contact us at Dennis Young Insurance Agency, insuring Shelbyville and surrounding areas since 1988.
Alrighty, back in here with the weekend wrap up on Monday.
On Monday, yes. And I just real quick wanted to go back to last week because I forgot the biggest news of the week on our feed was we had a new coffee shop open, Dutch Bros. Over 100,000 people saw that announcement that went out Monday night, I think it was. And I think about half of those didn't understand sarcasm and didn't get my tongue-in-cheek reference to the suffering for lack of coffee options. So we wish them well. I stopped by, I had some of their coffee. It was decent. So I didn't see any huge lines there like some of the other ones when Seven Brew opened. They were like lined up down the street. And this one didn't seem to have quite that. But they also didn't do a lot of marketing on the front end, which Seven Brew did. So we wish them well, and we wish the zebra well. But in the in the upcoming week, not a whole lot going on. Actually, while we were sitting here blabbing, the city had their pre-planning meeting this morning at 9:00. And real quick, before we went on the air, I drove over there just to get the agenda, and there was a whopping 2 items on the agenda. So that is back-to-back months that there is very little going on in development in the city, which is odd this time of year. It's summertime. You would think there would be more. I don't again, I hate to call a trend when you're only, a couple months into it, but that is very unusual for that little to be going on.
Well, Josh,
city,
I think if people are following what's going on nationwide,
yeah,
maybe some of the fear of some of the housing issues that are going on nationwide start
right.
to seek in a little bit.
Right.
And people aren't willing to put that money out there and risk it because they don't know if they're going to sell. And there's some stuff around that hadn't sold that should have already been sold.
We've got a lot, particularly in the townhome, multifamily area. We've got a ton of units sitting on the market, brand new for sale, that are not moving in town right now.
And from what I understand, some of those are turning into rentals like predicted.
Yeah.
And some of those rentals are starting to come down.
Right.
So
yeah,
if somebody's looking for a place, they're probably going to get a pretty good deal over the next few months.
Yeah, other than the interest rates, which still haven't
Right.
Come down enough. So, pre-planning didn't go to it, but not a lot happened. I don't think. I'll find out more about that in the upcoming weeks, and we'll cover it if something did happen. Tuesday, tomorrow evening, we got the county commission meeting. I've looked at that agenda. That's another one that I couldn't find anything on there that's going to require a lot of conversation. I will be shocked if that meeting goes over. I'm going to call 30 minutes right now.
Okay.
Based on what I saw on there. I'm going to say somewhere in that time period. The only thing on there that was kind of long in the packet was there's that financing they're going to do with the new 911 center, where they're going to take a $5 million county bond and then use that $5 million to finance the 911 center. But that money is paid back from the 911 fund. It doesn't impact county taxpayers at all. So I don't see how that could be controversial. But if anything were to get talked about, that would be the one at that meeting. And then Thursday evening, we've got the monthly city council meeting, and kind of like the county commission meeting, I'm going to call about 30 minutes on that one as well. It took us 20 minutes for the study session. There's a lot more reading that has to happen at the city council meeting. They have to read all of this twice.
So
and
give them
stuff.
10
so
more
I'm going to give them
minutes.
10 more minutes for reading. But it's the exact same rezonings that we just blew through in 20 minutes at the study session. There's only one that probably won't pass. Now, a couple of them are controversial because on first reading last month, we had a lot of public feedback. A lot of people came out and spoke against them. But since they passed unanimously at first reading, I don't expect a lot of those people back. If they do come back, that would make the meeting a little longer if we had more public comment. But that's really all that's on the agenda. I think we're getting Public Works a new skid steer that he'd been waiting on all year, but nothing crazy.
Right.
So really everybody is still zoned in on budgets, I think.
Yeah.
The county budget is still a little more up in the air than the city budget, but I think all of that will be wrapped up in the next couple of weeks. So we'll be keeping an eye on it. And Lord willing, the creek don't rise. We may be back here on Saturday morning.
Hopefully we will be back on regular schedule.
Regular schedule, same time, same place, same channel. But if not, we'll just pop up at random on a Monday morning if we have to.
That's right. Or who knows? You never know.
You never know when we're going to show up.
That's right. Thanks for watching, everybody. And again, thanks to our sponsors, Dennis Young Insurance and Leverett Power Washing. We thank them, and we'll be back again
Saturday.
Have a good day.